What's up, guys? We are back with another review, taking a look at the latest from Boss Fight Studios, and a bit of a departure in some ways for them, specifically for their H.A.C.K.S line of figures, which up until now have really been a 1/18, 3 3/4, 4-inch kind of line. But we're taking a look at a whole mess of 1/12 H.A.C.K.S figures, and these are the new Epic H.A.C.K.S figures. Specifically for this wave, all of them are skeletons, which I'm very much on board for. So we got 4 skeletons to talk about in this new 1/12 line that is still much part of the H.A.C.K.S world. So very much in my wheelhouse. Skeletons, 1/12 scale, I'm here for it. We got 4 to talk about, and they all come on unique card backs, which I really like. Everything is tailored to each figure. So we've got the Barbarian, and we've got the Gladiator. So we've got stuff that's sort of rooted in real world history. I mean, there's still skeleton warriors, but gladiators and barbarians existed, right? But we've also got the more fantastical. We've got the Grim Spectre, which is a blue skeleton, and we've got the Pirate, which is a green skeleton. Now, again, these all come on card backs, so I don't know, I guess a retro style feel based on what we get nowadays, but you've got the figures there in their blister, and then again, each figure gets unique card art on the front, and they get a unique card art on the back. So there's a render of the figure on the back with sort of a showcase of some of their accessories, a cross-sell, as well as an individual write-up for each figure. So I'm really excited to take a look at these guys. Obviously, Mythic Legions is a huge thing for me, and I love skeleton stuff, so I'm really been curious to see how these are going to stack up and what they're going to offer, because, I mean, frankly, there is just a ton of skeleton stuff coming out these days, and I'm here for it. So let's do it. Let's pull these guys out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Boss Fight Studio 6-inch Epic H.A.C.K.S skeleton. So again, this is kind of like an offshoot of their pretty long-standing Vitruvian H.A.C.K.S line of figures, which of course are 3 3/4, 4-inch figures. A lot of skeletons in that line also, and now they've started this new line with skeletons. So this whole wave is just skeletons, and then we'll get other stuff as we go along, I believe. So we're going to take a look at each of these figures. As far as articulation goes, they're all the same, really. It's a skeleton. They're all built on the same framework, so I'm only going to go through one of them. We're going to use the Barbarian skeleton because it's probably the easiest. It's the most, I guess, naked skeleton out of the bunch, so he's the best one to show you what is actually able to move versus some of these other figures that actually have a lot more stuff on them. They all basically move exactly the same way, even with some of this clothing on, but you're going to be able to get the most bang for your buck out of watching that guy. Now, as far as moving this guy around, these things are pretty posable. They do have some limitations. There's one area that I think is more limited than I was expecting, but there are also some points of articulation on this thing that just have some pretty crazy range. I'm assuming that's just because of the fact that it is a skeleton, and it can have that. There's not a lot of limitations in some areas. So to start with, we've got a ball peg for the head, so it looks up a little bit. Not too much, a little bit more than that. Down really good though. You've got an articulated jaw. We've got tilt side to side, a little bit of tilt side to side. Full rotation though. Arms out at the shoulders. You're going to rotate forward and backward all the way. 90-degree single jointed elbow with rotation. No bicep swivel because no bicep. And then you've got ball hinges at the wrist, so really good range here because of course nothing in the way. And then you can rotate all the way around. The torso is the area where I feel like it's definitely a little bit limited. So there's like a post, the spine is the post, going up into the torso from the hips. And it allows you to swivel up there, but it's not really necessary because you've actually got a ball hinge at the waist. So it allows him to go forward a little bit, and I feel like he can probably go further. It's the loincloth on all of these figures. The loincloth is going to get in the way. So you've got to watch that. But they can tilt pretty nicely side to side, and there's also a swivel point up there too. So it's not super limited. He doesn't have some hyper ab crunch though. You're not going to get that, and it's mostly I think because you're hitting yourself right there. So that's a pretty good crunch though. It's not perfect, but it's also not the worst thing ever either. We've got double ball peg or double ball hinge hips rather. So there's a ball hinge that goes into the hip and a ball hinge that goes into the leg. It also allows for some drop down, so the actual joint itself will drop down. The whole thing goes out. You can get full-on splits out of these guys. So that's really nice. They swivel forward and backward. And because of the joint style, it allows for a thigh swivel, despite the fact that there is, of course, no thigh on this figure. So I do really like that. Knees are pretty nuts, though. I mean, they are as collapsible as any knee I've ever seen, basically. So full range there with that double joint. And then down here at the ankles, you've got another ball hinge. So it's rotation at the ankle itself, and then pretty solid rocker, and then hinge up and down. Now, some figures are different. You know, they don't all have boots on like this one does. Some of them have bare feet, and then some figures have swappable feet. The figures that have just like actual bone feet do have a little bit more range. But for the most part, you're going to find consistent articulation across the board with these because, of course, they are the same base body. But I think for the most part, they do move really, really well. Joints are nice and tight. I don't really have any issues with them. I didn't have to heat anything up, none of that stuff. So everything right out of the box moves pretty fluidly. The only thing that's kind of weird is that some of these joints are different from what I would expect to have seen. I wasn't expecting to see this type of joint structure for the hips, but after playing around with it, it's kind of a welcome sight because it does allow some pretty crazy range when in, you know, otherwise some other lines, you know, I'm thinking Mythic Legions for sure. When it comes to skeletons, they are somewhat more limited at the hips, but with this figure, it is just, you know, free reign. You can move them however you want. Now, as far as the overall look and feel, I'm going to go through each one of these figures individually because while they're very similar, they're also very, very different from one another. I mean, we've got blue and green skeletons, so there's a lot of variance with these figures. But I think at face value, these are pretty solid. I'm very much invested in, you know, as many skeleton figures as I can get my hands on these days. But there's something really exciting about these because they feel like, the best way I can think about describing them is that they are the skeleton within your 6-inch figure. Like, they definitely match up with 6-inch figures, but they're also a little gaunt and, of course, more slender than your normal 6-inch figure because they very much feel like the skeleton within a figure. And that's, you know, that's a very different kind of thing, I think, from what I'm kind of used to. So you've got these very, and I'm not using this word in a negative sense, but a very spindly figure. They're all very thin and wafy in many ways. Like, there's not a lot of substance to these when it comes to, you know, what you feel in your hands. And again, that's not a negative thing. It's just like, this is literally trying to be an actual skeleton. Not a skeleton man or not a fully armored skeleton or anything like that. This is not a Mythic Legion style skeleton. It's something very, very different. But I think it works really well. I mean, the bones look tremendous. I mean, they look like an actual human skeleton, as much as it can be for a toy, obviously. You've got clothing that is very much hanging off of the bones. Like this thing right here, this is flopping around, and I don't take that to be a negative because it shouldn't be tight on a skeleton. It should have been tight on the body that it was on when the skeleton was alive. So this thing, you know, it's not super taut on the skin or, well, the bones. It's sort of flopping around. Everything seems a little big as far as what he's wearing, you know. It's very much, this was a living creature that is now a skeleton. So I think that's how I'm interpreting it, and it definitely seems to work for me. I think the sculpt is good. Sizing is really good. Again, if you're taking it in the way that I'm taking it, I think the sizing is really good. The one thing that I'm not the biggest fan of with these figures so far is the figures with boots. I don't really like this thing down here, the way that they've got it constructed, just to have it. Like, this looks really good, but then you've got to sort of watch it. So this is the actual top of the boot that sits over top of the ankle, and then it sort of connects with the foot. So it looks like a full boot, but it allows for more range at the same time, so it's kind of a give and take there. I don't like the way it looks in some instances, but I think it's really functional, so it's all right. But I'm really happy with this thing. It's just a cool looking skeleton. And, you know, it's a little more anatomically correct in some ways. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be comparing these to Mythic Legions, and we'll get to size comparisons here in a bit. But I think they look pretty solid. I do like the fact that we've got, you know, articulated jaws. There's the one thing that kind of stands out with these is that there's not a ton of paint on the actual bones themselves. Probably could have used a little bit of a wash just to make them look a little bit dirty. But at the same time, because we've got sort of fantastical colors, maybe it's not the biggest deal. You know, this is your average bone color. We've got like a darker one, the sort of gray one. There's a blue one. There's a green one. So, you know, maybe it's not the biggest deal. But there's plenty of paint, plenty of detail, plenty of weathering and sculpt all over the battle harness and this big crazy loincloth. I mean, this again, the loincloth on this guy really sort of hammers home the point that this was a living human or something, and now he's a skeleton because it doesn't look like it fits him all that well. It looks really big. And one thing that I have to point out, the hip structure inside these things, like, it's a full-on set of hips. Like, it's not just hips on a toy. This is hip bones. There's even a coccyx up in there. So you've got a, like, you know, a vestigial tailbone up in there, which is crazy. Entirely unnecessary, but of course it makes it far more realistic. So, you know, you've got slightly more realistic fantasy bone man. So I think he looks really cool. And of course, he comes with a good deal of accessories here too. We're going to go ahead and talk about them all at once. So you've got your Barbarian style helmet with a sort of asymmetrical set of horns. We've got a spiked club, and all the weaponry and everything has a good deal of paint on it too. So if there's not any on the bones, you know, it's gone to the weapons. So you've got your spiked mace. We've got our sword, and he's actually got weapon storage on his back for the sword. So that can go back there. And you've got this sort of like frosted axe, kind of like a Viking axe. It's got like runes and stuff on it. And then this guy, in lieu of extra hands, he actually comes with extra feet. I kind of mentioned this already. He's got a set of swappable bone feet. So you can take the boots off, take the boot sleeves off, and then you can put these on, and he's got full-on set of skeletal feet. And then all of these figures, I'm not going to run through this on all of them, they all come with an epic H.A.C.K.S stand, which frankly, I'm not sure I need it. I know they feel pretty sturdy, so I haven't had any issues worrying about them falling down. But if you do worry about it, they do include a stand. So kind of the full package here with all these accessories. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and you get a stand, and it's a really cool looking skeleton man. Next up, we've got the Gladiator skeleton. So we had a Barbarian, now we've got a Gladiator. They were real things. Of course, once they become reanimated skeletons, that's where realism starts and stops. But the one thing I want to focus on with this figure is mostly the armor. He does have a different color on the bone. So the Gladiator is a more normal bone color. This guy is a little bit darker, more smoky, I think is the best way for me to describe him, specifically on the front of the skull. But otherwise, they're really, really, really close, but slightly different. So you do have variance in the bone color there. He's got this very asymmetrical pauldron with weapon storage on the back, so you can sheath something back there. But I really like the metallic on this particular figure, this really nice gold copper color. There's a little bit of patina on this as well. Really cool sculpt on this sort of lion's head that's on the pauldron here. You've got his tattered loincloth with the belt. And of course, all of the stuff he's wearing goes with my idea that these pieces of armor were meant for something larger. And now that they are skeletons, they don't necessarily fit as well. They fit on the figure just fine. But in terms of how they look, they do skew a little large. And it works within, what I'm viewing this as. Specifically, these, leg pieces down here. These are not replacement legs. Like, the legs are actually inside this, so they are sleeved around the legs. You could take them off if you wanted to, just pop the foot off and they'll come off. But you've got these huge, huge pieces of armor down here, which have more of that lion motif going on, more of that copper color, more of that gold color. Nice metallic still, again, tons of sculpt, tons of detail. And then you've got more of that patina all over it too. So this guy offers, a similar take to the Barbarian, just sort of different subject matter. So Barbarian to Gladiator. And then we've got a bunch of gladiatorial themed accessories that go along with it. The first, and my favorite, is this head, which is, well, it's a helmet, and it actually fits over top really, really well. I absolutely love this. I love this style of helmet. Really cool, very imposing, very menacing, and more of that same color, more of that patina. You've got a lot of pitted texture all over this too, so just tons and tons of detail all over this thing. And it's just a crazy look. I love the look of this style of helmet. We get this guy right here, which is actually a new hand. So pop a hand off, and you can shove this in there, and you've got this sort of like bladed gauntlet thing that he can wear, which is just wild. I really like that. More of that copper color. Once you get him fully decked out, he's going to have tons and tons of this metallic all over him. We get this crooked style blade, which I frankly have no idea what this is supposed to be called, but it's rad looking. Again, tons of metallic. We get a short sword here, like a Gladius maybe, I think is what this might be. And you've got the option to, of course, store one on his back, so you can put that on his back. And then we've got, of course, he's a Gladiator, so he's going to need a shield. So you've got a shield, and just tons of sculpt on this too. And it's even got like some battle damage here over on the side here. And you've got your handles on the back. So one will wrap around the arm, and one is to be grasped as well. And this is really dirty and patinaed and everything. So he comes with a lot of very, very themed accessories. I mean, they all do. That's the whole point of this. But I really like this guy when he's fully kitted out. I think he looks far more imposing, specifically with this helmet on, than he does otherwise. And then we come to our pirate, and I mean, arguably the cooler half of the wave for me. Colored skeletons, you really can't go wrong. This is the same thing I have with Mythic Legions. any of the colored skeletons are instantly cooler, and that's no different for this set. Not only is this one green, he's a pirate too, so you've got a bit of a cool factor on this one. They very much saved the cool stuff for the colored skeletons, I think. So he is, well, green. He's super green, he's hyper green. He is just like this screaming neon, very, very saturated green, and I absolutely love it. There is no reason why skeletons, as far as a toy line goes, can't be every color under the sun. Make an orange one, please, and I will be even happier, but I think he looks tremendous. Again, it's the same body, great sculpt, great sizing, and more of that idea that he is the remains of a former human. So some of his clothes just sort of hang off of him. And he has sort of the most sparse when it comes to clothing. You've got this very tattered shirt, nasty like scarf belt thing that's hanging down here, and what looks like the unfortunate remains of some pirates' underwear down here. But he is very much mostly naked, so you've got a lot of exposed bones on this guy. You can easily get the shirt off. You just pop the head off and it'll slide off. So you could have an uncovered chest if you wanted. Of course, he does have the bandana up here. He's got the eye patch. This head is unique. It does not have the articulated jaw. He does have another head that has it, though. We've got more of those boots down here. So he's got blue boots this time, and it's more of the thing where you can slide this up and down and move it around. Still not my favorite aspect of these, but it is functional. So I'm happy that it did save some functionality down at those ankles. But it's all about the color on this guy. It just pops, for lack of a better word. It pops. It's incredibly bright and vibrant, and it's just cool and fun, and it's a toy skeleton, so why not, right? He does come with some really good accessories too. Again, very much themed, so we'll pop this off and put the other head on. And there you've got your regular, skeleton head, which of course, I suppose I could have just said skull. And you've got that right there. He does have the articulated jaw on this one, so you do retain that functionality with the other head sculpt. And then we've got some weaponry as well. So he's got a rapier sword, which looks great. Nice detail on here. The hilt in particular is really cool just because of these free-floating spiral pieces. So that's really nice. We've got a cutlass, which is all dinged and pitted and worn. It's got, like nicks in it all over. He can store this here. And then we've also got this little dagger that can be stored on the back of the little belt piece that he has too. So you've got options for storage of some weapons, which I'm always happy with. And then he's one of the other figures that includes the swappable feet. So you've got a set of green feet here if you want to replace those boots. So he's got a pretty solid array of stuff here. But again, it's all about the fact that this is a green pirate skeleton. Honestly, what's not to love about that? And then last but certainly not least, because this is far and away my favorite of this particular wave, we've got the Grim Spectre figure, which of course is their take on a very colorful Grim Reaper. And I'm perfectly happy with the fact that they've decided to make him blue. I think it looks tremendous. And just like with our green pirate skeleton, the blue on this figure is incredibly deep and vibrant and saturated, and it just looks tremendous. He does, of course, have soft goods. It's not wired or anything. It's just basically meant to be this sort of tattered robe that hangs over top of him, and it does work really, really well. It fits him nicely. It's not too huge, but it definitely does seem a little bit baggy, but not in the way that it's encumbering him. It's not really in the way. It doesn't impede his articulation really at all. And then he's got some separate plastic for what would be a hood here. So you've got this sort of tattered neckline here that does wrap around to the back. And I'm jacking up his get up here. So let's sort of fix him up a little bit. There we go. That's better. So you've got that piece down there. And then the hood is actually a separate piece, which can be taken off maybe a little bit more gracefully than I just did. But then you've got your blue skull underneath. And of course, this is also articulated. So it's one of the articulated jaws. But he's got multiple display options just by virtue of this hood and the skull underneath. You've got your loincloth here with pouches and scrolls. He's got weapon storage back here, and this looks really good. It's got that sort of wet look to it that makes it sort of look like leather almost. But then the rest of them is basically exposed. So, this is the best way to get a look at the hip structure underneath these figures too. There's your nude skeleton shot for the day. And you can see the full situation that they've got down here in terms of how some of this stuff moves. And then, of course, that little tailbone back there, which I still think is ridiculous that we have it. But, of course, that's what it is. That's a skeleton. So I'm pretty happy that they included that. I think he looks tremendous. And this figure only gets better as you add more accessories to him. And in many ways, he feels like a little bit of a different kind of figure because of what he comes with. So to start with, we get extra hands, this is the only figure that has extra hands. So he gets 2 sets. He's got gripping hands on him in the box. You get a set of pointing finger hands, which very much makes sense to me for a Grim Reaper kind of figure. And then you get these open palm, slightly grasping hands, which will come in handy, no pun intended, for the next accessory, which is this like very satanic looking tome. So you got a pentagram on it. And then it's got this sort of, braid that runs down, which has a peg on it, which is meant to house this flame, because of course this is an evil, satanic, dark book. So you gotta have fire. There's gotta be fire coming out of this book, right? As he recites some evil incantation. Why not? And he can't be a Grim Reaper without a scythe. So it's got this sort of gnarly handle, staff on it, and then you've got this bloodied up blade. This does fit back here, so he can store it on his back while he reads from his favorite book. This thing's got some size to it. It's really big. It's almost as big as the figure itself. But the coolest accessory, well, at least my favorite accessory here, requires us to swap heads. Because, I mean, why not, right? Why not have an alt head for this guy? He gets a pumpkin head. And I absolutely love this head sculpt. I think it looks awesome. Looks really, really good. The sculpt work on this pumpkin, that's kind of weird to say, looks tremendous. That face, though, is really great. It's just some evil, maniacal-looking expression, and then you've got all that bright green inside to make it look like some sort of, nether energy or something like that coming through that skull. So this guy is, he's easily my favorite. There's a lot to like about this one. Grim Reaper aesthetic, pumpkin head, scythe, blue skeleton, soft goods, the whole deal. This one is easily my favorite out of the bunch. Not that I don't like any of them. I'm very happy with all of them, but this one just sort of steals the show for me because there's a lot of cool stuff just sort of crammed into one figure here. And since you've been so patient or skipped ahead to the end, here is our size comparison. So we've got our epic hacks in the middle. We've got a 2.0 skeleton for Mythic Legions on the left. We've got a 1.0 skeleton for Mythic Legions on the right. And they work okay. They're not going to be necessarily one-to-one by any means. They're pretty close to the 2.0 skeletons, because of course 2.0 is a more slender body style. But Mythic Legions is more towards a 7-inch scale figure anyway, so they definitely are not necessarily the same thing. You're certainly going to be able to use them. Bodies come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, so you can probably fudge them into however you're going to do it, but don't expect them to be the same thing as a Mythic Legion skeleton. What really does it for me, though, is looking at it from the perspective of how I've sort of described it 800 times now, where this is the skeleton of a toy. Look at it next to this Mezco Conan, and you can see that this thing looks very, very close in terms of sizing, as if this skeleton could fit inside that body. And that's how I'm sort of viewing these. I feel like this works really, really well in terms of showcasing a skeleton next to an actual human that's a 6-inch figure. So that works for me. And let's move this one aside and let's do a Hasbro figure. So here is Spirit from G.I. Joe Classified, and I think that kind of works in the same vein as well. And then let's sort of change scales entirely. Let's move Conan aside. Here is a Figuarts. Here is Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. And then let's go with a Super 7 figure. So here is Lion-O from Thundercats, the toy version. And of course, that's way out of scale. And then let's do one more that is another very fresh in mind line. Let's do an Animal Warriors of the Kingdom. There is Tiberius. So you get an idea of what we're working with here. They are not necessarily the same thing as a Mythic Legion skeleton, but they work in some ways, and I feel like they're going to work really, really well alongside actual humanoid characters in the 112 6-inch range. So yeah, overall, I'm really happy with these. I think they're a lot of fun, and that's ultimately what this one comes down to for me, is that these are a lot of fun to play around with. They're pretty goofy in many ways. Let's be honest, they're pretty goofy. They're skeletons with, armor, skeletons that are pirates, skeleton Grim Reaper, blue skeleton, green skeleton. Goofy is kind of in the blueprint here right out of the gate, and I very much like that kind of stuff. But they look great, they move well. There's still a lot of crazy range on these figures, hips in particular, knees, Lots of range there, so you've got good posability throughout. They're very sturdy. They feel really good. They come with a lot of cool accessories. So yeah, I think this is going to be a lot of fun for a lot of folks who are just very much into skeletons. So thanks again to Boss Fight for sending these over. I'm really happy to take a look at these. I'll put links down below to all the places that you can pick them up, because they are still on pre-order now, and they will be here very, very, very soon. So that's going to do it for this look at the Boss Fight Studio Epic Hacks Skeletons. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.